Excellent. I think we've got most of the sort of delegates that we were expecting now, so we will get started. So the webinar that you guys have all signed up for, you volunteered to attend, is the latest in a series of webinars from Cadcorp, and today we're focusing specifically on using desktop GIS for crime and incident analysis. And we've had a really large response to this webinar. So we've had over 100 delegates registered, and they're actually from lots of different industries. So we've probably got about 50% from UK police forces, from all over the country, from Devon and Somerset up to certainly West Yorkshire, North Yorkshire as well, across the country. We've also got other emergency services joining as well today, so a number of fire services that are interested in these techniques for incident analysis, and also lots of local government customers as well that are interested in techniques maybe for managing antisocial behaviour or any of the sort of analytical type capability that they do as part of their role. So I'd like to offer you all a really warm welcome to this morning's webinar. I'm just going to start with just a bit of sort of housekeeping. So we will, at the end of this webinar, we will be sending you a copy of the webinar as a recording. So there's no need to worry too much about sort of creating notes. Like I say, a recording will be on its way to you to access after the event. The Q&A session is going to be sort of open throughout the webinar, so please send questions to myself and my colleague Simon. And at the end of the webinar, we've allowed sort of some time to answer as many questions as we can. If we don't get to your specific question, then by the end of the day, myself or one of my colleagues is going to be in contact to answer your question that you posted. So we'll try and do it in part of the session. If not, we'll come back to you offline later on this afternoon. At the end of the webinar, don't rush off straight away because there is going to be just a short survey that's launched, and we just really appreciate the sort of feedback from these webinars. That really helps us sort of plan the sort of content and the structure of both Cadcorp webinars and also the face-to-face events that we run, including the emergency services face-to-face conference that we'll be planning for later this year. So please complete the survey. We really appreciate your feedback. We're going to start just with some introductions. So earlier I was looking at the sort of delegate list today, and I think I recognised about sort of half of the delegates of people that I've either met when I've come on site to visit your organisation, or I've maybe met more recently in online meetings. So about half of you probably know who I am, but the other sort of 50% of people attending today, we thought it'd be useful just to introduce ourselves. So my name is Gary Randall. I'm the sales director at Cadcorp, but also the account manager for many of our emergency services customers, which do include police, fire and rescue, and ambulance services as well. So that's me, and I'm going to just hand over to my co-presenter Simon, who's going to introduce himself. So Simon, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Good morning, everybody. My name is Simon Parker. I'm the pre-sales team leader at Cadcorp, and during this webinar, I'll be providing a live demonstration just to show you some of the sort of different options for analysing crime and incident data.
Excellent, thank you, Simon. So the sort of webinar that you've all signed up for today, the sort of principal aim of the webinar is, as it says on the screen here, so a technical introduction into some of the latest crime and incident analysis capability within the Cadcorp desktop GIS, which is called Cadcorp SIS Desktop. A lot of it does say in the sort of in the aims here that it is a sort of technical introduction. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sort of setting the scene about this subject and just giving you a bit of background about some of the latest capability and why it's got introduced and where it's come from. just so you sort of understand where we're coming from. And then I'm going to be handing over to my colleague Simon, and he's going to be doing a sort of technical sort of presentation about some of these techniques. Some of the techniques he will be using are quite advanced, but there's help available from the online help that Cadcorp provides. But we're also going to be talking in more detail about some new training options we're actually launching today as well. So so look out for that when we get to that section. This webinar is very much designed for both existing customers that might be using Cadcorp SIS Desktop at the moment, either in the cloud or on premise, or people that are just interested in the technology and interested in finding out more. If you do want to find out more about the sort of technology that we're talking about today, there'll be options in the feedback form to request more information, and we'll be sharing contact details. So please do reach out. We can always arrange a sort of one-on-one sort of webinar online type meeting where we can talk about your specific requirements that you might have within your organisation. Just to make sure everybody's awake, we're going to start with just a quick poll just to get some more feedback about the sort of type of organisations here and their sort of experience with GIS. So hopefully you can now see that's popped up a poll which is, have you previously used GIS to produce a hotspot map? So I'm just going to give you not long, but I'm going to give you 5 seconds or so just to complete that, and then I'm going to just talk you through the results. So yeah, it's really interesting. So we've got a split where we've got 3/4 of the audience have used GIS to produce hotspot maps before. So some of the techniques you'll be familiar with that Simon's going to be showing, and about a quarter are new to this type of analysis. So you're also very welcome, and you're in safe hands. And you'll sort of, by the end of this session, you'll know more about this this subject. Okay, thank you everybody for that. So I think, like I said, I recognised about 50% of the audience for people that have come across Cadcorp before, but about half the audience today, you might be new to Cadcorp. So I've included one slide just to explain who we are as an organisation. So we're a GIS or spatial insight company, and we provide a range of software and services to help with GIS and mapping and spatial sort of related analysis. We do that across a range of different sectors. Today, there is very much going to be a bias towards emergency services. So when I pass over to Simon, the sort of use cases that he's going to be talking about is about crime analysis and incident analysis, but these techniques do very much apply to other people that are registered today. So as I mentioned earlier, maybe you're in an analyst in local government and you're interested in using these techniques to model antisocial behaviour or other sort of point-based incident data that finds its way to your desk. So everybody's very much welcome, but like I say, there's going to be a bit of a bias towards emergency services use cases. So that was one slide about the company, and I've also just got one slide about our sort of product set. So the name of the GIS that we're going to be showing today is called Cadcorp Spatial Information System, or Cadcorp SIS for short, and that's provided as a desktop GIS, as a web mapping interface, and as a mobile application. Today we're very much focused on the sort of analyst use case. So Simon, for 95% of the presentation, is going to be using a desktop GIS to show you the sort of more advanced analytical capability. And towards the end, we'll touch on some of the options for sharing that analysis with a wider audience in a more user-friendly report or web mapping interface. All the software that Cadcorp provide can now be either hosted in the cloud, where you access the desktop GIS through a browser, or you can install it locally in your organization. And Cadcorp's sort of happy to provide both options. What we're finding is that more and more customers are migrating to using SIS Desktop in the cloud, and we'll probably sort of touch on some of the reasons for that as we go. But like I say, both options are available depending upon the preference of your organisation. And then the products that we offer have a number of key strengths which allow us to sort of differentiate with other GIS software in the market. And I'm going to be talking a bit more about those key strengths shortly. So I'll mention those in the next few slides. So when we were putting this sort of webinar together, we wanted to talk about the latest capability. That was sort of in the sort of aims of the webinar that you saw earlier. And this is the sort of process that we've been through recently at Cadcorp. So for many years, we've had a desktop GIS, which is widely used by all emergency services and local government within the UK, and that has a lot of sort of capability, which I'll talk about shortly. Towards the end of last year, we were made aware of some work that the College of Policing have been doing in the UK about different analytical techniques that they were recommending that police customers could be using and benefiting from. We then took part in a series of sort of customer engagements, which again I'll talk about shortly as well, which led to a development sprint at Cadcorp and some software development and a new service release which hit the streets at the start of May. And again, I'm going to tell you a bit more about those 4 steps. So the starting point and also the ending point of that process is Cadcorp SIS Desktop. And for the people that perhaps aren't so familiar with this product, it's a desktop GIS which has a lot of capability just as part of the core product. So, for example, it supports a lot, over 300 file formats and database connections. So if you're used to sort of multi-agency working where you've got different government agencies providing you with different files, then Cadcorp products are really good in that type of situation. As a UK company, we're committed to supporting all Ordnance Survey data directly, and that's never been more important than it is today with the latest changes from the Ordnance Survey with their NGD product set. For example, with our routing analysis, we can use the average speeds from the NGD, and some of the latest building attributes that's part of the NGD is just really, really important to analysts across all the different sort of sectors that I've mentioned before. So that's really key to Cadcorp. As well as that, there's lots of other tools that can be used for crime and incident analysis that have been there for many, many years, including creating a wide range of thematic maps and different hotspot mapping techniques. Temporal analysis is really important for these use cases. So as well as looking at location of crimes and incidents on a map, we also want to see how that spreads across different times of the day or weeks of the months, and there's going to be a use case about that. As well as 3D visualization, which is again probably come into its own more recently as the Ordnance Survey started supplying you guys with more 3D data as part of the public sector geospatial agreement. So lots of capability. And the big thing at Cadcorp that our users will be aware of, but I want to make sure everybody's on the same page, is that all that functionality is included as standard. So we're not asking any of our customers to license routing add-ons or license Ordnance Survey add-ons or license crime analysis add-ons. This functionality is there, it's included in the product, which is great. It's good commercially because your organization doesn't have to buy additional extensions, but it's also really good because it means you guys don't have to worry about which analyst needs to do routing and which analyst needs to do 3D. Everybody can have access to that functionality to be used if and when they want it, which is really key. The other part of that process was the sort of College of Policing. So they've been publishing advice about different techniques that is relevant to policing, but other sectors as well. And we'll be talking a bit more about that shortly. The third part of that process was the sort of customer engagement. So we've got a large number of existing customers that we're able to talk to and get feedback from. We've also got this sort of growing community of users, so there's some reference to some recent contract wins that Cadcorp has won in this sector, including a contract with Devon and Cornwall Police. The screen image there is from our last emergency services conference, which is where there was also customer engagement. And I'm just remembering that a team from West Yorkshire Police asked a question about geocoding using what 3 words, and that capability also made it into the development sprint that we're talking about today, and has been included within the service release. We won't actually be having time to talk about that today, but please message me either in an email or on the survey, and we'll make sure that we send you guys more information if what 3 words geocoding is relevant to your organisation. So then the sort of final part of the process was what led to we completed the development, and then we dropped the release on the 7th of May, which was a new service release that all our existing customers have access to as part of their annual maintenance support package, and that's what we're going to be sort of focusing on today when Simon talks about the new capability. These on the screen here, you can see some of the sort of techniques and functionality that is been available in Cadcorp SIS Desktop for many years, that you all probably very familiar with and have been using. On top of that, we've added some new capabilities. So these are some of the things to look out for when I hand over to Simon shortly. So a technique called count and classify, a technique called nearest neighbor index, an analytical option called calculating spatial mean, and my colleague Simon's got a really good example of how to use that. There's analysis technique called 80-20 analysis, and earlier this week, our marketing manager Gwen, who puts these events together behind the scenes, sent me an article from this month's Emergency Times article, where it talked about 80-20 analysis being partly responsible for a 16% reduction in knife crime in West Midlands. So which is just great to see GIS techniques being directly associated to impact on the street. And again, when I hand over to Simon shortly, he's got a use case for 80-20 analysis, and you can find out more about it there. And another technique that's been added as well is location quotient as well, and Simon's going to be talking a bit more about that. And then the final technique is the Moran Eyes spatial calculations as well, a range of different options, and again they're going to get mentioned. Like I said at the start of the webinar, some of these techniques are more advanced, but it's obviously good for you guys to know about them, and we're going to be talking about the support that's available, I think, actually on the next slide, which actually does bring me nicely on to give you some news about a new training course that has been launched today. So my colleague Gwen, who I mentioned earlier, updated our website earlier. So we're really pleased to be launching at Cadcorp a new training course, which is called Cadcorp SIS Desktop for crime and incident analysis. It's a one-day course. Like all the training at Cadcorp, customers have the option of attending a scheduled course on a certain date, where other customers will be involved in as well, and that is happening on the 16th of September. Or we can organise a course specifically for your organisation. Again, that can be either online or on site if you prefer. And not straight away, but after this webinar, if you go to the training section in the Cadcorp website, you can download the Cadcorp training brochure, which talks about all the different courses and gives you a bit more information about the content of the new course. And again, obviously shout if you've got any questions. So that brings me on to sort of handing over to my colleague Simon. So I'm going to hand over to to Simon. He's going to share his screen, and we're going to see Cadcorp SIS Desktop pop up shortly. And he's going to talk you through a technical presentation where he introduces you to some of these techniques. So Simon, I'm going to hand over to you.
Great, thank you, Gary. So yeah, I'll just share my screen and we'll make a start. Okay, let's just rearrange some windows. Right, okay, we're ready to go. So yeah, so for my demonstration this morning, we're going to explore a range of techniques that are included in Cadcorp SIS Desktop for crime and incident analysis. And yep, these techniques offer different approaches for spotting sort of patterns and trends in crime or incident data, and that enables police forces, emergency services to sort of target resources and activities in these areas where crime or incidents are most concentrated to help reduce these incident levels. So for those of you who are new to the Cadcorp SIS solution, so this is our Cadcorp SIS desktop interface. And yep, it provides a lot of capabilities for visualizing data and performing a variety of analysis. And if you're looking at the top of the interface and thinking, yep, that looks actually quite similar or very familiar, we have adopted the Microsoft ribbons or UI. Yeah, it has that similar look and feel to Microsoft Office products. And yeah, we've done that deliberately just to provide that familiar and intuitive interface. And we're in the software, and you'll see this during my demonstration. We have a lot of wizard sort of driven activities just to try and keep things simple. So just as one example here, if I jump to the add overlay wizard here, you can use this wizard to connect to any of the 300 plus data formats that we support. So that includes the common GIS and CAD formats like shapefile, tab, DWG. Could be connections to databases like SQL Server, where you may want to connect to your incident data. You can consume OGC web services. And then as an Ordnance Survey partner, we also have a dedicated wizard for connecting to their data. And that includes a dedicated wizard for the Data Hub. So this is where you can access some of their API services. So for instance, you could load in some backdrop mapping from the OS Maps API, or you can connect to the NGD API and access some of their data themes like buildings. And this supports all of the recent enhancements that the Ordnance Survey made to the Data Hub back in March. So let's now explore the many sort of techniques that you could potentially use within the software for crime and incident analysis. And we'll start with the basics. So here, yep, I've got an Ordnance Survey backdrop map. And on the left in this project, I've got a view of some incident data. So each incident is plotted on the map as a point. And maybe from this particular view, maybe we could draw some conclusions from the data. But when you've got lots of data, that's going to be quite a challenge. So there are a number of sort of different ways we may analyze that data further. We could visualize the data in a number of different ways. Maybe we could visualize the data using a cluster theme. So this changes gives us a different perspective to the data. And I've colored these clusters from green to red to show sort of low to high numbers. So it's pretty obvious to spot where the highest counts of clustered crimes or incidents are located. And yep, this particular view might give us some clues, but it might not tell us the whole story. There might be, might be high crime numbers here because perhaps the population is also high in these areas as well. Using that generalization that maybe more incidents or crimes occur where there are more people, and that is a relationship we can explore later on in the demonstration. So let's now take a look at some of the different ways we could analyze the data further. And a very quick and simple assessment of incident data can be calculating the spatial mean, because we want to understand the average geographical location of, say, criminal activity. And this is a new addition to the software. And for the first time today, I'm going to access our processes within Cadcorp SIS Desktop. And this is where you can access several spatial analysis techniques that are designed for this type of data. So we want to find a spatial mean for my set of data points. So we're going to go to the Create tab, and we're going to access the process dialog. So we'll select our input data set, which is my incidence. I'm going to use this search option at the top to find the spatial mean process. And we actually have two options that you can play with. So the first one here will calculate the average location for my data points. The second option is you can also calculate a weighted spatial mean. So maybe using time, we may want to weight the spatial mean towards more recent incidents, or we could weight it towards a specific type of incident. I'm just going to create the average location today. So we're going to select the process. We're going to run it and add the outputs just to an empty overlay in my project. And this red pin is showing our spatial mean for this set of data points. And that could also be really useful for comparing changes over time, because you might want to compare the spatial mean maybe at monthly or yearly intervals, just to see if that average location of, say, criminal activity has moved. And I'll show you sort of an example of that a little bit later on with our temporal analysis option. Or you may use it to look at a specific type of incident. Let's say maybe burglaries, typically clustered to the west of the city. Therefore, when you create your spatial mean will be there to be located in the west. But then maybe a new wave of burglaries start occurring in the north, and that spatial mean will shift accordingly. And then you've now detected sort of an emerging trend. So that is a spatial mean. Let's now take a slightly different approach. So rather than looking at the sort of the average location of crime, this time we want to maybe identify where crimes are occurring more commonly, or perhaps pinpointing where the highest risk of crime might be, because that can help us allocate our resources more effectively. And this next approach is 80-20 analysis, or also known as the Pareto principle. And it suggests that a large majority of incidents occur at a small number of locations, hence that kind of that 80-20 divide. So let's now test that principle with my set of data. So we're going to return back to the process dialog. The input data set is my incidence. And then at the top, I'm going to search for the 80-20 analysis options, and we have two available. Now I'm going to select the cluster option for this example. So this uses a density-based spatial clustering algorithm. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's going to take my data and create clusters from it. There are a number of variables to configure. So you can choose the minimum number of points that are required to make a cluster. And you can also define a radius as well. So I'm going to use a value of 200 meters today. And then I'm going to complete the process and add the results to an overlay in my project. And these red circles represent my clusters. And to kind of test that Pareto principle, we need to view the table behind the results. So let's open the table view. Now, the process adds a number of sort of columns to the results, and it orders the clusters from largest to smallest. So if I just jump to the third column here, this column tells us the number of incidents in a cluster. So we can see that's going from largest to smallest. If we then jump to the first column, this gives us the cumulative percentage of incidents. So if we scroll down, we want to find the row at which we hit 80% of incidents. So I'm going to select that row there. And then if I jump to the second column, this gives us the cumulative percentage of location. So 80% of incidents have occurred, if you round it up, to 16% of locations. So that Pareto principle has been satisfied in this particular example. And if we want to see those locations on the map, let's just move this table view as a new vertical view alongside the map. And then I can use a query builder wizard just to filter the view there, so we can just see where, or see those locations where 80% of incidents have occurred, and we can see those locations there on the map. And yeah, that could be really valuable insight, again, to sort of target our resources and our activities in these particular areas. There was two options in that 80-20 analysis. The second one allows you to perform that analysis with like linear features, like a road network. So just to show you sort of a pre-prepared example here, I've got some RTC incidents. Using that other 80-20 process, you can snap that to a road network and yeah, basically understand where most RTCs have occurred, and again testing that 80-20 split. And my result looks a little bit like this. So here we're kind of seeing those high risk roads in terms of RTC. So if you're involved with local partnerships with highways agencies and local authorities, these roads might be candidates for safer road programs. And then just before moving on, using the results of my 80-20 analysis, especially sort of the cluster results, and we do have in the software a variety of routing capabilities. And you could potentially use those routing tools to maybe draw up potential patrol routes to target those areas where most crimes are occurring. So from that sort of cluster results, I grabbed the top 5% in this particular example, and then I use the itinerary option to sort of develop a potential patrol route to optimize sort of a patrol route for these particular locations. And there are many other sort of use cases for the routing tools in the software. You could optimize maybe response routes from particular locations. You can, if you're planning for major public events, maybe model the position of officers and emergency access routes. Or you can even create foot patrol routes using the path network data from the Ordnance Survey. So that would be helpful for areas where perhaps vehicles don't have access to patrol. So let's move on from 80-20 analysis. And I'm also just going to take a different approach. And for the next couple of examples, we're going to focus on point in polygon analysis. Now, perhaps I want to just explore and count the number of incidents that have occurred within each of these areas on the map here. Now I'm using LSOAs for my example today, but you can use any geography that you wish. So against this LSOA, we want to count the number of incidents within them. So against the overlay, I can launch another wizard where I can say, yeah, let's use this count option to count incidents within each of these areas. And if I use the info button here and just interrogate one of these LSOAs, it adds a new attribute to them with a total count of incidents. And we can use that to create a choropleth map using our theming options to kind of visualize those results. So we go back up to the toolbar here, choose the add theme wizard. We're going to grab our LSOA boundaries. We'll add a range theme using that count of incidents that we've just created. Lots of options here, so you can divide your results. So I'm going to divide it into 5 ranges. We'll update those or round those values up to the nearest 10, but you can have custom ranges if you wish. And then in this next dialog, we're choosing sort of the styling for our choropleth map. So I'm going to maintain a black outline for my LSOAs, but just to kind of show the different ranges and the count of incidents, let's use a sequential ramp of red. So the darker the red, the higher the count of incidents. And yeah, from this particular visualization, yeah, we can perhaps identify some very distinctive and neighboring LSOAs in this area with high counts in the city center. Now, another way of doing that type of analysis is via the process dialog, and you can select the new count and classify option. Now, the benefit of this one is that in addition to doing a total count, it can also do a count by classification as well. So you can count numbers of crime by crime type within each of those, in my example, LSOAs. So I've already run this process, and here are my results of that. So I've just used the same visualization as the previous example, but this time if I interrogate an LSOA, yep, we have our total count of incidents. But if I expand this classification attribute here, we now get a breakdown by incident type. So from this particular view, I can see that ASB and violence and sexual offences have with the highest count within this particular LSOA, and then I could perhaps interrogate some of the neighboring LSOAs just to see if there is a similar pattern, and that might lead to a more sort of focused stream of work analysing these specific crime types. You can also do count and classify against a road network as well, and the results will look something like this. So you'll have your road network to start with, you have your incidents, and then by running the process, it snaps your incidents to the nearest roads, and the results will look something like this, where you'll only see roads where you've got a count registered against it, and that could potentially be used for some of your street segment analysis work. And then we saw in those results with count and classify that we had a high number of incidents classified as violence and sexual offences. So here is just another map, here looking at historical incidents of this particular type going back some time. I created another choropleth map, counting them by LSOAs. Again, the darker the red, the higher the count. But for this particular example, I want to move away from just sort of a hard count of incidents and maybe consider population numbers as well. So in this example, if I interrogate an LSOA, in addition to a count of incidents, I've also got the population numbers as well. And we can maybe analyze these together and focus on crime rates per population within these LSOAs. Now, I could use expressions in the software to create crime rates, or I can use a new process called location quotient. And this is a method which will analyze the crime rates for each of my LSOAs in this example. It will compare it to the city average, and then it will tell us if an LSOA has a higher, lower, or average crime rate compared to the rest of the city as a whole. And this is available in the process dialog, and I've run this process already, and here are the results of that. And what the process does is it adds a new column to my LSOAs with the location quotient value, and then I've used that to create this choropleth map. And if I just expose the legend for my choropleth map, so if you get a value of greater than 1, then the LSOA has a higher sort of rate compared to the city average. And we can see in this particular view, we have some neighbouring areas in red where that rate is higher. And this approach might be preferred to just a simple sort of total count of crimes within an area. Because I mentioned that sort of generalization earlier, that maybe more crimes occur because there are more people living in these areas. So this approach, considering rates of crime, might give us a better perspective. Right, so just moving away from using boundaries to explore counts and concentrations of incidents, another approach in the software is performing hotspot analysis. And this is very popular because it can help us identify where crimes or incidents are concentrated, and that might guide increased police presence in hotspot areas as a deterrent for crime. And in the software, we support both kernel density estimation and Getis-Ord-Gi star. So let's take KDE to begin with. KDE helps us to show where crimes are concentrated, and we have a dedicated wizard for this. So I'm going to grab my incident data, jump to the analysis tab, and launch the hotspot wizard. So we've got the two different options there. I'm going to select the KDE option. I don't have time to run through all the different parameters today, so I'll just keep it quite high level. But I will point out on this first dialog, this is where you configure the grid. And you do have some different grid options. You can have a standard grid, you can use hexagons, you can use circles. The next part of the wizard is where you define your kernel and many different options to work with. And then in the next dialog, we then choose the styling for our hotspot. So I'm just going to access our ramp here. So I'm going to choose a color range for my hotspots. And then I'm just going to apply a bit of transparency to those colors so we can see some base mapping underneath. And then we'll complete the wizard, add the results to an overlay in the project. And if I just turn off the original point data, we've now got the result with the options I selected in the wizard. So I've got a smooth hotspot map with red and orange areas, kind of showing where crimes are most dense. And this is a good visualization that could be shared with stakeholders. The other approach is Getis-Ord-Gi star, which identifies both hot and cold spots. And it also uses statistical confidence, and the wizard is very similar to KDE. So I'm just going to go straight to the results for this particular example. So for this one, I used hexagons as my output. If I use the info button and click within one of these hexagons, it provides both the p-value and z-score. And if I just sort of expose the legend for the results here, basically, yeah, the red hexagons are showing a clustering of high values indicating a statistically significant hotspot. So those are the two types of hotspot analysis available within the software. There are two more new processes available in the software, which I'll just briefly touch upon this morning, that also measure clustering. The first one is Moran's eye. So for my particular input data set, I've got a grid of hexagons. Each hexagon has a count of incidents within them, but you can use any geography. And then Moran's eye will identify if there are any groups of neighboring hexagons with similar counts of crime. And yep, the result will look a little bit like this. Let's just expose the styling for this. Just move that to the left. So yep, you get an index score for Moran's eye. And in this particular example, the red areas sort of indicate a clustering of high crime areas. And yeah, we're actually seeing very similar patterns across the different types of analysis that I've been showing, most of them identifying this part of the city as a hotspot for crime. And then the other approach is the nearest neighbor index. And this looks at clustering of data points within polygons. So let's take an LSOA boundary. Let's look at the incidents within that boundary. Are they clustered or are they dispersed? And it does that by measuring distances between the incident points. And yep, here are my results for this particular one. Again, if I just expose the legend and move that to the left-hand side, it gives you an index score. So an index score of less than 1 indicates a polygon here with a clustering of data points within it. So yeah, during my demonstration, I've shared quite a lot of different techniques for analyzing incident data. They all have their own merits and their suitable use cases. But once you've done that analysis, you've identified those patterns or emerging trends, we want to share that insight to a wider audience. And there are different options available. Now, if you wanted to kind of share analysis that looked at changes over time, you can publish temporal videos from the GIS. So let's display the temporal view. This particular view gives you easy filtering options. So if you wanted to look at incidents that happened at a specific day or time, you can do that, or look at incidents within a particular range of dates. Or in the second option here, you can also create and publish temporal videos. So you can export them to MP4 format, and that can be used to help illustrate your data or show any trends in the data as well. So in this example, I've got some burglary incidents on the map here. We're going to run this playback video, and this is just going to show a view of burglaries on a month-by-month basis. So we can get a kind of general picture sort of over time of where and when burglaries have occurred. If I stop that and we'll just bring that back to the beginning, you can also repeat that sort of temporal view with any of the types of analysis I've shared today. So here we're looking at hotspots on a month-by-month basis. And then just one last example. Let's just bring that back to the beginning. Here I've got an example of the spatial mean. So let's just zoom into the map. This time, if we just run the video here. So yeah, using the spatial mean here. I'm also enabled this accumulate option. So as we go through the months of the year, it keeps those data points on the map. So it just allows us to view how that spatial mean for burglaries has changed on a month-by-month basis. And for this particular example, it actually remains quite central in the city and actually doesn't move too far away from that particular location. And as I said, these playbacks, videos, yep, you can export them to MP4 files for sharing outside of the GIS. Another option is that you can create multi-layered PDF documents which can be shared electronically to officers or maybe used as content during officer briefings. So here's just an example where I've focused on ASB. Here I've got a PDF map showing where we've had recent ASB incidents, but I've also used the PDF and supported it with some of the analysis that I've prepared in the desktop software. So in here, using sort of the layer capability within the free Adobe Reader software, I could maybe share kind of the hotspot analysis for ASB incidents. I could overlay that with maybe our neighborhood police areas just to give us a bit of a sort of geographical context to where these particular hotspots are located. Maybe just as another example, here's an output from the location quotient analysis. So looking at crime rate per population and kind of identifying the areas with the highest crime rates. And that insight and visualization just brings context to those targeted campaigns that you might be activating, and it just provides the evidence based to officers to say, this is where we've got a problem. These are the areas we need to target, either through more visible patrols or perhaps other measures to reduce these crime occurrences. And it's just a simple PDF document. And then the last final option before I go back to Gary, as I'll just mention sort of web mapping. So yeah, this just enables you to increase your data visibility further. So it just allows officers, colleagues to access information in a really simple to use interface, and it's accessible on any device that is browser enabled. And it could be used to share some of the analysis you've done in the desktop GIS. It could be used to show operational data, maybe ongoing incidents. It could be used to show real-time officer locations. And maybe an interesting piece of work is if you have your officers or GPS data, maybe overlaying that with your hotspots to see if officers are spending time in these priority areas. So yeah, I've compacted a lot of information in a short amount of time and probably only scratched the surface of some of the examples I've shared today. But yeah, I just wanted to share, there's lots of opportunities to analyze crime and incident data to help you identify those emerging trends in the type of incident and where they are committed. And yeah, that insight just helps you to guide your resources and activities in the most efficient way to address any specific problems you may have in your community. So thank you for watching my demonstration. I'll now hand you back to Gary. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Simon. You've got a lot of content covered then, which is great. So we're going to have time now for a sort of Q&A, and I can see that we've got a lot of questions that have come through. So we'll do our best to sort of work through them. I'm going to take the first few to give Simon a bit of time to have a glass of water and rest his voice. And yeah, we'll do that for 5 minutes. And then I'm going to just have one slide to wrap up, and then we'll launch the sort of feedback poll that I mentioned earlier. So just starting off with the sort of questions. So we had a few training related questions. So one was about how to book training courses. So if you go to the training section on the Cadcorp website, you can complete an inquiry there, which is option 1, or option 2, when we get to the feedback form, when that pops up, just put a note in there, and myself or one of my colleagues will be in contact with details on how to book the courses. So so look out for that. I think earlier I've mentioned about sort of cloud versus on-site, which has probably prompted this question about the sort of pros and cons of those options. It's perhaps something to discuss with your sort of IT team about your own sort of preferences. But I did say that the sort of direction of travel has been towards cloud hosted. And I suppose one of the big benefits is that with cloud hosting, Cadcorp takes responsibility for upgrading the software. So when this new release appeared at the start of May, our Cadcorp cloud customers got access to that release straight away without a requirement for your IT team to install new releases. So that's one of the big advantages. I think maybe Simon, a quick question for you. I think it's probably off the back of the fact that I mentioned what 3 words earlier at the start. Can you just summarise maybe some of the latest capability related to what 3 words within SIS Desktop, Simon?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so in the last service release of Cadcorp SIS Desktop, yeah, we added support for what 3 words, and there's actually several different ways to utilize it. So if you sort of hover your cursor over the map, you can retrieve the what 3 word address for that particular location. If you have a what 3 word address and you want to find it on the map, you can use a little search bar right at the top of the desktop interface. You can type in the what 3 word address in there, and yeah, that will take you to that location. And then there's one more. Oh, yeah, you can also geocode what 3 word addresses as well. So if you had like a list in a spreadsheet or something similar, you can import that into the desktop GIS, and then you can use the geocoder to convert them and display them over your OS mapping. And then if you needed to, you could then extract that coordinate information out of the GIS if you needed it somewhere else. And I guess it's also worth mentioning, we also have support in the web map interface, which I showed at the end. So in the web map interface, you can click on the map, retrieve the what 3 word address, and again, you can search for what 3 word address as well. And yeah, it's just also worth mentioning, with that integration, you do require an API key from what 3 words.
Excellent, thank you. And Simon, certainly the use case that I remember the analysts asking about at their emergency services conference was where they were being given a sort of Excel spreadsheet of lots of what 3 words locations, and they wanted to be able to view those on the map. So that's my recollection. There's a question from one of our fire service customers about actually a really interesting one about using 80/20 analysis for fire service incidents, and that sounds like a really good idea because like with crime, our community of fire service analysts will be aware that often there's a correlation between where fires have happened in the past and where they're likely to happen in the future. So that's a good shout. There's actually a question here from, I mentioned earlier that we've got some existing customers and some people that are new to Cadcorp. So there's a question about how we compare to another GIS software which you might have heard of called Esri. So I think there's probably lots of ways in which you can sort of look at that question. I suppose probably in my mind the big things are probably the integration. The fact that all the software, all the functionality we mentioned is part of the core product, so you don't need to license additional add-ons. And I suppose also I'd probably throw into that the support for Ordnance Survey data within Cadcorp, because we're a UK company. We're putting support for Ordnance Survey data as part of the core product. So hopefully that answers that. But if you need more details, give me a shout in the feedback. I think we're getting there. There's a question about sort of project files and how they're managed, and I'm going to get some advice from my colleagues and come back to the guy that's posted that. So I'll come back to you this afternoon. Perhaps one final sort of question for you, Simon. Obviously, a lot of the analytical stuff you've been using today has been using the sort of process option in Cadcorp SIS. And there's a question about if they need to be configured every time they get used.
No, so some of the processes, like the spatial mean that I showed you, doesn't have any configuration at all. So you just select your input data set, select the process, and then it will create the output. But for those that do require a bit of configuration, you can save those with your sort of chosen parameters to what we call a library file. So yeah, if it's like a repeatable task, you want to repeat that process because maybe you want to compare the results for incidents at different instances in time. You can basically recall that process with those saved parameters and just run it. So the benefit of that is it just saves you time. But I guess it also ensures consistency as well every time you perform the analysis, because you're also using the same parameters. So yeah, hope that answers your question.
Excellent, thank you, Simon. And I'll just jump on one last question, was about actually on-site training. So yeah, that's still an option. So so if it is on-site training that you want, then mention that in the feedback form, and we can provide details about that. So I'm just looking at the clock, and we've got 5 minutes left. So I am going to end the Q&A there. If we didn't get to your question, then like I say, myself or the team will be getting back to you by the end of the day with an answer to your question. But thanks for those. That's really helpful. Okay, so I'm just going to jump on to sharing my screen just for one last time, just to briefly summarize the sort of key takeaways from this session. So the first thing that we just really wanted to get across, and hopefully that's been clear both in this sort of intro but also in the presentation, is the functionality we've shown you today is included as standard within SIS Desktop. So it's available, ready to be used. So if you're an existing customer, you can get access to the latest release and start using it. There was actually a question about sort of trying out the software for people that aren't existing customers, and we can do that. So we can offer evaluations of the products. So if you're interested in that, then just to make a note in the feedback, and we'll send more details about that. The second takeaway that we just wanted to make sure people are aware of, obviously analysts do lots of really interesting and important work, and it's really key to have interactive ways of sharing the results. So Simon showed sort of two options earlier, which was the interactive PDF and using a sort of web mapping interface. But depending on your audience, there's different options and sort of pros and cons depending on what the objective is. And then the final sort of takeaway is we were aware when we were putting this together that we were showing some advanced functionality. So don't worry, there's sort of help available, and there's the new training course that Cadcorp are launching today to cover these techniques. And if you've got specific questions about any of the functionality you've seen, then contact us either via email or via the feedback survey. And before I launch the feedback survey, I just wanted to mention a couple of events that Simon and I are actually going to be at in the next, one next week and one towards the end of the summer. So next week, Simon and I will be at the National Fire Chiefs Council's IT conference in Solihull. So if you're there, please come along and say hello, and you can ask questions about some of the examples you've seen today, or just have a chat over a coffee and a biscuit, which will be good to meet you. Simon and I are also going to be at the Emergency Services Tech Show, which is happening in Birmingham at the NEC on the 17th and 18th of September. And we're there to support one of our partners, which is the Ordnance Survey. So we're going to be on the Ordnance Survey stand, using Ordnance Survey data and using some of the techniques today to show people what can be possible combining Ordnance Survey data with the sort of analytical capability that Cadcorp is able to offer. These are just some contact details. So we've got there the main switchboard number. If you've got any questions, then by all means call the switchboard, and I'll be able to pick those up this afternoon. There's a general inquiries email address, but also my personal Cadcorp email address. So if you've got questions, please feel free to drop me a line. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to launch the feedback poll. So I'll press launch shortly, and I'm then going to be bringing this sort of the webinar to a close. So